A lot of candidates find it difficult to know what they should say in their IELTS Speaking Part 2 answer. So today I'm going to help you navigate this question a little bit better. My name is Lara Ryan. I've been an IELTS examiner for writing and speaking. I've been an IELTS teacher at British Council. I've been teaching IELTS since 2010 and I'm the founder of Complete Test Success. As always, before we get started, make sure to click like on my video and subscribe to my channel. First of all, let's discuss the topic. The topic is at the top of the cue card. For example, this one says, describe a time when you visited a friend's home. Now, when I'm practicing with my IELTS students, they'll very often say something like, but I never visit my friends' homes. And I don't think that's necessarily true. You have never in your life visited a friend's house? I doubt that. Now, perhaps you haven't done it recently, but even think back to when you were a child. Surely at some point in your life, you have been in a friend's house. And if that's the case, where you haven't done it for a long time, just talk about that time when you did it, when it was a long time ago in your childhood. But then there will be very, very rare instances where it's actually true. So perhaps for some reason in this person's culture, it's not normal to visit somebody's home, that you would always meet outside the home at a cafe or when you're a child in the playground or whatever it would be. So if the truth is that you never, ever, ever, really never visit a friend's home, then your answer can be about that. So you would start your answer by saying, well, in my culture, it's not normal to visit anybody's home. When we want to meet our friends, this is what we do. And you would continue explaining the situation in your country. Now, in your answer, it's essential that you answer the topic, but your answer doesn't have to be completely about that exact aspect. So if you're talking about a time you visited your friend's home, you don't just have to talk about that one experience. You can talk about your friend, you can talk about how you know your friend, why they invited you around to the home. You might talk about how their home is different from your home. You might talk about how you expected their house to look and how it really looked. Anything that's relevant is appropriate. So it doesn't specifically have to be about that exact experience, but just discussing the topic in general is okay. Now, I've had students ask me if they should invent a story, and I really recommend that you avoid doing this. When you have to invent a story, there's much more going on in your brain. You're putting much more pressure on yourself to come up with ideas and vocab and grammar and consider all of these things. If at all possible, you should try to communicate about a real experience that you had, because then you're not trying to think of ideas and communicate them. You're just remembering your experience and communicating that, and that will inevitably be much easier and result in a better answer. It's also important to keep your story simple. The more complicated your answer is, the more mistakes you're going to make. Keep it simple, and that will make it much easier for you to deliver a strong answer. A very common mistake that we see, and it's one that you might not really consider deeply, but you must respond to exactly what the question says. So if it says a time you visited a friend's home and you talk about a time you visited a family member's home, well then you're not answering the question. It's a very easy mistake to make. So do make sure you read the question carefully and that you do respond exactly to the topic you've been asked to discuss. The final point I want to make about the topic is that you should not memorize answers. It's very common in some countries for people to memorize answers that they think they will be able to use in the IELTS speaking test, but doing this does not help you get a high score. You should practice Part 2 questions. You should learn vocabulary, but don't learn full answers that you intend using in your IELTS test. In case you're not already aware, I've got free live feedback lessons on Zoom every week for my email subscribers. So take a look in the video description, you'll find the link there, and once you sign up, you will see the schedule for these free lessons. Next, I want to talk to you about the prompts. The prompts can be found under the topic. It's where it says here, you should say who your friend is, what their home is like, why you went to their home, and explain how you felt about getting there. The thing about these prompts is that you don't need to discuss every one of them. You don't need to discuss them in order. You don't need to discuss all of them. So they're just there to help you think of ideas. If they're helpful, you should discuss them. If you want to ignore them, that's no problem at all. As long as you're discussing the topic, that's fine. These prompts are just to give you some extra support. Now, a lot of IELTS candidates, they'll approach IELTS Speaking Part 2 by trying to discuss each prompt one at a time, as if the objective is to pass on the information regarding these prompts. So they might do something like this. They'll say, "My friend is Jane. Their home is very nice. I went to their home 2 years ago. I had a very nice experience." So that was an exaggerated example, but we do see this quite a lot in the IELTS speaking test, where the candidates just respond to each prompt, and when they're finished, they don't know what to say next. So don't just give the information. Try to communicate like you're telling a story. You're not there to give a presentation about pieces of information. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend. Tell the story, communicate the story. Don't just give your friend's name very briefly. Talk about your friend. Elaborate on each prompt. And like I said, if you want to skip some prompts, that's fine, but do try to communicate like it is a story rather than a presentation. And there tends to be some misunderstandings about finishing your answer. So first of all, let's just see where it says how long your answer should be. So over here in the instructions, it says you will have to talk about the topic for 1 to 2 minutes. However, the reality is that you need to discuss it for 2 minutes. I'm not sure why they say 1 to 2 minutes in the instructions, but it is definitely 2 minutes. And then there's actually no need to conclude your answer. So you want to stay speaking for 2 minutes, but let's say if the examiner didn't stop you, it would take you 4 minutes to finish your answer. That's no problem. You don't need to conclude your answer. You don't need to finish discussing each prompt. Just stay talking as if you're telling a story, and don't worry about, oh, am I nearly at 2 minutes? Do I need to conclude my answer? It's not a problem. If you're in the middle of your answer and you're still talking and the examiner says thank you and stops you from talking, that's exactly what you want to happen. Now, there are other English language tests where you have to conclude your answer within the time frame, but that is not the case in the IELTS test, so just don't worry about trying to finish your answer or complete all the prompts within the 2 minutes. So if you're trying to improve your score and improve your Task 2 performance, try to experiment a little bit. You've got 1 minute to make notes before you start speaking. For some people, making notes about the vocabulary that they will use is the most helpful thing. For other people, making notes of the ideas they will discuss is most helpful. And for some people, it's best for them to make no notes and just think about their ideas during the 1 minute to prepare. I've also had students who have better answers if they completely ignore the prompts. So they will just look at the topic and tell a story about that topic as if they're talking to a friend. So rather than letting the prompts guide them, they just let their own story develop naturally, and this is better for them. Some students find it easier to follow the prompts. So just experiment with both ways and see what's best for you and what results in the strongest answers. And of course, different teachers will have different strategies, so try experimenting with those as well. So try different ways of doing it, do lots of practice, find which one is best for you, and then just continue using that to help you get stronger and stronger at developing your Part 2 answers. So besides playing around with different strategies, you must also acknowledge that your main weaknesses will come from either your fluency, your vocab, your grammar, or your pronunciation. So make sure that you spend time working on those individually as well. Part 2 strategies are definitely a help, but inevitably you do need to improve your speaking skills. So don't ignore those completely. Okay, and as we're finishing up, what I'd like you to do is leave a comment and let me know, are there any approaches or any strategies that you use for speaking Part 2 that you felt are useful?